I never thought my life would collapse because of a car. That morning, I brought a warm batch of waffles to my daughter-in-law's house to surprise her. But the moment I turned into the driveway, I saw the dark blue sedan of Leon, my husband, parked right by Sophie's door. I froze. Leon had said he was going on a business trip hundreds of miles away today. My heart nearly dropped to the ground when I heard his familiar laughter drifting out through the kitchen window, blending with Sophie's sweet, almost sickening voice. I held onto the wall, trying not to fall. Then a sentence from inside made my whole body turn cold. If Aaron finds out, we're finished. In that second, I understood. I was no longer the woman they thought they could easily fool. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I don't remember how many steps I backed away. I only know the waffles slipped from my hand and fell onto the tiled walkway. That sound, a soft, damp thud, still exploded in my head like thunder. A gift I had made with all my heart lay smashed at my feet, just like my 30-year marriage crumbling piece by piece. I stood there, barely breathing, afraid even the smallest noise would alert them inside. But then I realized they weren't even being cautious. Betrayers always assume the victim is still blind. I turned around, stepping back as if the ground could collapse beneath me at any moment. My hands were ice cold, my heart pounding so fast I thought I might collapse before reaching my car. When I finally got inside, I had to sit still for several minutes just to steady my breathing. Everything inside me felt bent out of shape. I drove home, or rather, the car drove itself, because my mind was completely blank. The traffic lights turned from green to red, then red to green, and I couldn't remember which streets I had passed in the small Oregon town where I had lived for nearly 2 decades. When I walked into the kitchen, I set my purse down on the table, but my hands trembled so hard I had to hold my own wrist. I looked at the family photo hanging on the wall. Me, Leon, our son Aaron, and Sophie. The person I once thought was the daughter I never had. The picture suddenly looked distorted, so much that I had to turn away. I sat in the kitchen for hours, the noon light fading, darkness filling the room, and I didn't even realize time was passing. All I knew was that I had lost something bigger than trust. I had lost the very idea of family. Around nearly 6 in the evening, I heard the door open. Leon came home. He walked in with the familiar, tired look of a middle-class American husband after work. The most sickening part was how perfectly he played that role, almost naturally. He kissed my cheek, and right then I smelled perfume that wasn't mine. A sweet, sharp, floral scent, the kind Sophie always wore. My chest tightened painfully, but I stood still. I didn't pull away, didn't tremble, didn't ask anything. I stayed silent, and that silence made Leon even more at ease. A man who lies often never pays attention to the eyes of the person who truly sees him. Throughout dinner, he talked about a busy business trip that I knew never existed. I watched him lie as easily as breathing, and inside me, the feeling was not rage. It was realization, a cold, clean truth. Only a seasoned liar could stay that calm. I felt as if I had woken up after years of sleep, and the man sitting across from me was suddenly a stranger. I didn't scream, didn't break things, didn't throw suspicions at his face. Instead, the quieter I became, the more I felt myself cracking inside. But that cracking didn't destroy me like I once believed. It was transforming into something else, an icy clarity I never knew I had. That night, when he fell asleep with his steady breathing, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silence in the room felt like a cemetery. I turned to look at the man beside me, and I understood that from the moment I heard the words that morning, "If Aaron finds out," my life had split into two. One part still lay here beside him under this roof. The other had stepped into a place where truth was the only light I could hold on to. I told myself I had to watch every detail, every change in behavior, every call Leon received, every message Sophie sent me with that artificial sweetness. Instinct, the only weapon a woman my age still has after decades of sacrifice, told me that the affair was only the thin skin covering something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. I no longer saw myself as the victim. I began to sense a small flame, weak but very real, in the deepest corner of my mind, a flame not burning from pain but from resistance, from determination, from the understanding that if I kept surrendering, I would lose everything, not just my dignity, but the rest of my life. And right there in the darkness of that bedroom, where Leon slept peacefully as if no guilt weighed on him, I said to myself, I will not let them lead me by the nose for one more day. The next morning, the house I had lived in for over 20 years suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a temporary shelter. Every familiar sound, the heater switching on, the soft creak of the wooden floor, the coffee maker releasing steam, stabbed at my heart like needles. I sat blankly at the table, the cup before me still full but cold. Sunlight filtered through the curtains I once loved, yet today it made the room look bare, exposing every crack inside me. When I stood up to reach for a pan, memories of Leon's last-minute business trips surfaced. All those nights he came home late, saying he was stuck in meetings, stuck in traffic, or having dinner with clients. I had believed him because trust had become a habit for a wife who had grown too used to sacrificing. But now, with everything broken, I looked back and saw the holes everywhere. It felt like walking backward into the past, touching each memory and realizing it had been rotten for years without me admitting it. Thinking of Aaron, the child I loved more than anything, my heart twisted. Aaron always respected his father, believed Leon was the most admirable man alive. My son had no idea that the dinners he remembered as Dad working late could have been nothing but excuses. I couldn't imagine how deeply it would hurt him if he learned the truth. And that fear for Aaron was what kept me standing when all I wanted was to fall apart. I tried to make breakfast as usual, desperate to hold on to some sense of normalcy, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. I dropped the knife, spilled the milk, cracked eggs onto the stovetop. I cleaned everything quietly, unwilling to let Leon see me shaking. The bitter truth was that I didn't even recognize the woman I was becoming inside my own home. When Leon walked into the kitchen, he greeted me with a gentle smile and asked, "Did you sleep well?" His voice was natural and relaxed, so much that it chilled me. How could he go from Sophie's bed yesterday to my table this morning without skipping a beat? I looked at him without responding, and a slow burn of anger rose in me. Not because he betrayed me, but because he thought I would never find out. Leon sipped his coffee, opened the newspaper, chatted about the weather, as if our life had no cracks. His calmness made me want to withdraw even more. I didn't understand how I had ever loved this man, but then I reminded myself I needed to observe. I needed to remember every detail. This wasn't a marriage anymore, it was a battleground. After breakfast, once Leon left the house, I took a new notebook and began recording everything. The time he left, the time he came home, unfamiliar transactions on the bank statement, odd purchases, every subtle shift in his tone, the way he now kept his phone locked. Each line was a stab to the heart, but each line also strengthened my armor. The pain slowly turned into clarity, a sharp, cold clarity, not fueled by revenge, but by survival. I spent the whole morning rechecking receipts I normally ignored because I believed Leon handled everything. And that was when I found a hotel bill, booked under a company name I had never heard of. There was no reason for Leon to book a hotel room in the very city we lived in. I knew I had just touched the surface of something bigger. Before I could gather my breath, my phone buzzed with a message. It was Sophie. "Mom, are you feeling well this morning? I'd love to visit you soon. I miss you so much." I read each word, and my throat felt scorched. Sophie had never sent affectionate messages like this. That overly sweet tone only appeared when someone was hiding something ugly. I replied politely but curtly. I wanted to see how she reacted. Another message followed. "I just want to be sure you're not upset. You know I've always loved you." I set the phone down and stared at it, as if the small device could answer all of Sophie's secrets. Her message wasn't concern, it was a probe. She wanted to know whether I had heard anything yesterday, whether I suspected anything. And at that moment, a terrifyingly clear truth surfaced. Leon and Sophie were not only betraying love, marriage, and morality. They were hiding something bigger, something that could hurt not just me, but Aaron, something that needed to be exposed. I looked around the house, once our safe haven, our stability, our warmth. But now every corner was shadowed by the sentence I overheard through that window. "If Aaron finds out, we're finished." Those weren't the words of two people having an affair. They were the words of people hiding a crime. I took a deep breath, placed my hand on the notebook, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was waking up from a long, deceitful sleep. I knew what I had to do. From morning until late afternoon, one image kept replaying in my mind: the door to Leon's study. It was always locked. In all our years of marriage, I had never stepped inside without permission. Leon always said it was his private office, a place where he needed quiet for his projects. I had believed him, because trusting him had been my default as a wife. But now, that door felt like it was suffocating me. Every time I passed it, I felt as if something inside was knocking, whispering that the truth was in there, truth Leon wanted to bury. Late that afternoon, as I changed the bed sheets, I suddenly remembered an old wooden jewelry box, Leon's first birthday gift to me after we married. I hadn't opened it in years. I walked into the bedroom, pulled the box from the drawer, and lifted the lid. The soft scent of old wood drifted up, a scent from a time when I had trusted Leon completely. In the corner of the box, beneath the green velvet lining, was a small brass key. I froze. I recognized it immediately. Years ago, Leon had given me a spare key to his study, in case he forgot. Later, he said he no longer needed me to keep it, and I forgot it existed. But the key had been here all along, untouched, waiting. I picked it up. The cold metal spread across my palm. It wasn't fear. It was confirmation that my instincts had been right. That evening, Leon came home late again. He claimed he had a meeting with a client. I watched him lie without a blink, maintaining my calm exterior. That calmness, I realized, was exactly what made him believe I was still the same trusting wife. Around 11, Leon fell asleep quickly. I sat up in bed, waited until his breathing settled, then stepped out quietly. The dim hallway light stretched my shadow long and thin across the wall. I walked to the study door, holding the key tightly. I inserted it into the lock and turned it. A small click, and the door opened. The room glowed faintly from the lamp Leon always left on. Papers, files, and his laptop were scattered across the desk. I approached slowly, heart pounding but hands steady. File after file made no sense until I reached the thin folder with the line, "Transfer to Sophie Doyle. Account ending in 4827. My knees nearly buckled. I kept reading. Then I found the printed email. "Make the transfer before Aaron notices. I'll double check after the meeting." Leon's signature sat beneath it. I read it again and again, my eyes burning. This wasn't just adultery. This was theft. They were stealing from Aaron, our son. I photographed everything, every file, every email, every signature. With each photo, something inside me broke. But with each photo, another part of me came alive, stronger, sharper. When I closed the door behind me, I whispered to myself, I need a good lawyer, and I will find one. That was the first night in decades that I felt I was finally standing on my own side, and I knew I would not turn back. The next morning, I barely slept, not from fear, but from clarity. The documents and screenshots replayed in my mind like cold sparks. I knew I couldn't face this battle alone. A 62-year-old woman, after 3 decades of trusting blindly, could not single-handedly fight the schemes Leon and Sophie had built. I needed an ally. Daniel Porter came to mind, the attorney downtown, known for handling complicated divorce cases. People said he was calm, sharp, and never quick to judge. I called at 8 in the morning. He answered with steady confidence. 11 a.m. You can come in. And that voice felt like an anchor thrown into the rough sea I'd been drowning in. Daniel's office was inside an old red brick building, the glass door spotless, the interior simply arranged. Tall bookshelves, a few landscape paintings, a wall clock ticking steadily. The space smelled of wood and paper, the kind of scent that made you feel as if you were about to reorganize your life on a clearer, more orderly surface. When I stepped in, Daniel stood up to shake my hand. He was in his early 40s with lightly graying hair, bright but warm eyes, and steady hands that were firm without being rough. He didn't smile much, but the look in his eyes made me feel I wasn't being judged, even though I had come there with a heart full of torn edges. "Mrs. Doyle, please have a seat," he said. I sat down, my hands instinctively clasping each other beneath the desk. Daniel didn't rush me, didn't interrupt. He only nodded slightly as I began telling the story. The morning I brought waffles to Sophie, Leon's car, the laughter drifting through the window, the sentence that shattered me. Then I told him about searching through the files, the transfers, the email about before Aaron finds out, and how I photographed everything as if it were a survival reflex. Every word I spoke felt like a needle stitching back the torn pieces inside me. But Daniel only listened. No startled expressions, no rapid-fire questions. He let me talk until my breathing slowed. After I finished, Daniel laced his fingers together on the table. "Do you have evidence?" he asked. The question was gentle, direct, and necessary. I opened my purse and took out my phone. The screen lit up, showing the photos I had taken the night before. Daniel leaned in, examining each one. His eyes didn't change, but something in his demeanor sharpened, became more focused. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Doyle," he said slowly, "what I see here is not just infidelity. This is evidence of financial misconduct. If that account belongs to Sophie and the funds were transferred from a shared source connected to your son's company, then this matter may be reviewed by both family court and economic court." I tightened my hands. I suspected as much, but hearing someone who understood the law confirm it made me feel pain and relief at the same time. I want a divorce, I said, and I want to protect Aaron. I cannot allow those two to hurt my son for even one more minute. Daniel nodded, not surprised. He pulled a folder from the drawer and set it in front of me. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He looked at me for a moment as if assessing the resolve in my eyes. Then he said, "The first thing you must do is stay quiet." I tilted my head slightly. Daniel explained, his tone even but firm. If Leon or Sophie senses that you know the truth, they'll erase the trail. They may have already started, and if they see you anxious, they'll tighten their defenses. But if you remain silent, they'll keep behaving as usual, and their usual behavior leaves evidence. I felt the truth of his words. Last night, standing in the hallway outside Leon's secretive study, I had sensed that this wasn't a battle of emotions. This was a battle of strategy. "You keep observing," Daniel said. "Document everything. Collect everything. Don't confront them. Don't question them. The quieter you are, the more they reveal who they truly are." That last sentence sent a shiver down my back. It wasn't comfort. It was strategy. When I left Daniel's office, the sky was softly gray, the wind cool as it passed through the row of trees along the street. But my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I no longer felt like a betrayed wife stumbling around in her own home. I felt like someone standing on a high ridge, seeing the road ahead clearly, still rocky, but one I had to walk. When I returned home, everything inside me felt different. No more panic, no trembling. A strange calm wrapped around me, the kind of calm a person feels only when she realizes she has nothing left to lose except the truth. Leon was in the living room watching TV. He looked at me as I walked in, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. Maybe he sensed a change. My silence was not the same as before, no longer soft, but edged. Yet I didn't speak. I simply gave him a faint smile and walked past him as though nothing had happened. That calmness made Leon hesitate. He didn't understand it, but that only reassured me that I was on the right path. From that day on, I began to play the role of the perfect wife. I cooked the dishes Leon liked, asked him about work, even made his morning coffee exactly the way he preferred. I spoke just enough not to raise suspicion and stayed quiet just enough to observe. Not to save the marriage, but to protect my plan. And the more I watched, the more I saw Leon revealing glaring cracks. Calls he hung up on quickly when I entered the room, late returns home with vague explanations, the uneasy look in his eyes when he received certain messages. Each of those actions was like an ink mark on the map of wrongdoing I was gradually sketching. On Sunday night, as I was cleaning the kitchen, Daniel texted, "The longer you stay silent, the more they expose themselves. Don't forget that." I read the message like a vow I needed to carve into my heart, not for revenge, but to protect myself, protect Aaron, protect the life I built with my own hands. I put the phone away and looked around the familiar kitchen, the heart of my former family, and I quietly told myself, I've begun, and I will not stop. After meeting with Daniel, I entered an entirely new phase, a place where every breath, every word, every glance could become a clue. I began observing Leon and Sophie not with the emotions of a wife or a mother, but with the clarity of someone reconstructing a picture of wrongdoing. At family gatherings on weekends, I watched every glance they exchanged. Sophie kept her head down over her coffee longer than usual whenever Leon got up for more sugar. Leon talked about work with a tone light as air, but Sophie followed each of his words with her eyes, like someone making sure her accomplice didn't slip. Every tiny detail showed me how blind I had once been. I began noticing the way Sophie looked at me, not with the warm friendliness of the woman who once hugged me every Thanksgiving. Now her eyes were tight, cautious, as if one wrong word from me would bring everything crashing down. Sophie avoided being alone with me, always finding excuses to step away, to call a friend, water a plant, check a recipe, but I could tell she was simply avoiding risk. As for Leon, he believed he was subtle, but no one can hide the shift in their routine when they're preparing to do something illegal. The late-night work calls became more frequent, and each time Leon stepped into the backyard or the garage to talk, he carried his phone like a prison key, never out of reach. One night, Leon stepped outside for a call, leaving the door slightly cracked. Through that gap, I heard the sentence that chilled my blood. "Push that amount out before Friday. I don't want this dragging on." His voice was low and firm, not at all like the weary tone he used in front of me. I stood at the staircase, gripping the railing, realizing the documents I found were only the surface. Beneath it was a whole stream of money being shifted quietly from Aaron's company into Leon's and Sophie's pockets. I began to act even more carefully. When Leon left the house in the morning, I stood in his study for a moment, looking around like someone learning to read the silent language of lifeless objects. Unsealed envelopes, slightly misaligned folders, a journal with one corner sticking out. Everything became a code I needed to decipher. One afternoon, after Leon went out to meet a client, I installed an automatic recording program on his computer. I knew the line between ethics and survival was thin, but if I didn't act, the truth would disappear forever into the hands of two people who were cheating and breaking the law. The next day, when I opened the recording, I heard papers rustling, keyboard tapping, and then Leon's voice clear as day. "The final big transfer needs to go out this week. Don't let Aaron check the balance." I stopped the playback immediately, my palm cold and damp. I had been right. This wasn't just betrayal in the shadows. This was theft. This was destroying my son's future. From that moment on, my marriage became an intricate performance. I was the main actress, burying every real emotion beneath a gentle, calm mask. Leon acted more affectionate, as if trying to cover something. But I knew he wasn't doing it out of love. He was doing it to control what I might know. I let him play the role of the kind husband while I played the naive wife who suspected nothing. One evening, I saw a few documents Leon had left on the dining table. I hadn't planned to touch them, but when I glanced down, I saw the signature line under Joint Account Holder. It was my name. The signature looked exactly like mine, but I had never signed it. A chill ran down my spine. Leon had used my name to legitimize certain financial documents. Not once, likely many times. He had forged my signature, something I thought happened only in the news, never in my own home. I said nothing. I couldn't. Everything inside me swirled like a storm, but outwardly, I was calm, so calm that I scared myself. I simply photographed the document and put my phone away as if nothing had happened. When I had enough evidence, I emailed Daniel. "I have more evidence. I will bring it to your office tomorrow morning." Daniel replied with just 3 words, "Keep going." Perhaps it was that brevity that steadied me. He knew exactly what I was facing and what I needed most. Resolve. That night, while washing dishes, listening to the steady stream of water, I heard an envelope slide through the front door slot. No mail carrier, no knock. I wiped my hands with a towel and picked up the envelope. The handwriting on the front was so familiar, it made my chest tighten. Dear Mother Margaret, I feel like we haven't talked in a while. I miss you so much. Sophie. I opened the letter. Lines of gentle, overly affectionate handwriting filled the page. She mentioned times we cooked together, holiday decorations I gave her, words of encouragement I'd offered when she was going through something. She wrote that she could sense I was sad and wanted me to know I always had her. I folded the letter. Too sweet, too flattering. Panic disguised as tenderness. In that moment, I understood. They were starting to fear me. People only perform when they're not afraid, but when they start to tremble, they write letters, flatter, recall memories that aren't truly shared. I placed the letter with the other collected evidence. Each piece was a brick in the road leading to the truth, and I knew I was walking that road correctly. I looked around the house, once a haven of peace, now a stage for lies. And at the center of that stage was me, a reluctant actress who was slowly mastering her role, a role whose ending would not be applause, but light that would expose everything Leon and Sophie were trying to bury. The day I signed the divorce papers, the sky was gray but dry. The sky felt like a blank page waiting for someone to write on it. I sat in Daniel's office, a stack of thick legal papers in front of me. Cold, emotionless words listing my name, Leon's name, our wedding date, years of marriage, assets, responsibilities, all condensed into a few pages. Read it once more, just to be sure, Daniel said evenly. I read slowly. Each line felt like scissors cutting the invisible rope that had bound me to this marriage for 30 years. I didn't cry. In truth, my tears had dried the morning I saw Leon's car at Sophie's house. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked. I lifted my head and looked at him. "If I don't do this now," I whispered, "when will I ever have the courage to live the rest of my life?" Daniel nodded without comment. He slid the papers toward me and pointed to the signature line. I looked at the printed name, Margaret L. Doyle. For a moment, I thought of the young woman decades ago who signed her name at City Hall to get married. The same name. But the woman today was not the woman back then. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. The ink glided smoothly. When I finished, I set the pen down and heard a soft click on the wooden desk. A very small sound, but inside me, it echoed like a lock turning for the final time. "It's done," Daniel said. "From now on, leave the rest to me." I sat still for a moment, letting the truth settle in. "When will he know?" I asked. "As soon as the court receives the documents and sends the official notice," Daniel replied. "Within a day or two, maybe sooner." I nodded. Part of me wanted to run from everything, hide beside the ocean, pretend I had never seen those filthy records. But the stronger part told me, I have come this far. Turning back is not an option. On the way home, I pulled over on a quiet street while waiting for a red light. A strange feeling spread through my chest, light and painful at the same time, as if I had cut out a tumor that had grown deep inside me. It used to be part of my body, but it had also been killing me slowly. That afternoon, near 6 in the evening, the landline phone in the kitchen rang. The old kind of phone I kept out of habit, even though everyone used cell phones now. I was washing dishes, my hands covered in soap, but instinct told me I needed to answer. "Hello?" I said. There was a beat of silence. Then Leon's voice came through, tense and dry. "Margaret, what is happening?" His voice was no longer calm like usual, no longer the voice of a husband coming home asking his wife what was for dinner. I could hear his rushed breathing, the faint sound of someone speaking in the background at his office, and I understood. He had just gotten the call from the court. "The court called me," Leon continued. "You filed for divorce? Is this some kind of joke?" I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands, and leaned against the kitchen cabinet. "No," I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me. "It's not a joke." "What's going on with you? What's wrong, Margaret?" He lowered his voice, trying to sound concerned. "What did I do that made you—" "Leon," I cut in, soft but firm. "You know exactly what." Silence fell on the other end, as if someone had snatched the script right out of his hands. The pause stretched so long I could hear the hum of the air conditioner behind me. Then Leon changed his tone. "If you're upset about something, we can talk. 30 years. You're throwing everything away over a moment of anger?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It's not over a moment of anger," I answered. "It's because I spent 30 years trusting the wrong person." I set the phone down before he could say more. My hands no longer trembled. My heart pounded hard, but it wasn't fear. It was the heartbeat of someone who had finally made a decision she had hesitated over for far too long. Not 20 minutes later, my cell phone rang. Sophie's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds, then answered. I wanted to see what role she would play this time. "Mom?" Sophie's voice cracked, as if she were crying. "I just heard. What are you doing? This is a misunderstanding, it has to be." I didn't respond immediately. On the other end, she kept going. "Leon said the court called him, that you filed for divorce. You can't do something like that without talking to us first. Are you okay? Say something. I'm worried about you." Her voice was soft, drawn out, full of concern. 2 years ago, my heart might have melted. But now, every word only reminded me of all the times Sophie smiled at me across the dinner table, while almost certainly texting Leon messages I was never meant to see. "I'm fine," I said, deliberately using I instead of Mom. Sophie froze. A small shift in how I addressed myself was enough to make her lose balance. Margaret, why would you—" I didn't let her finish her performance. "Sophie," I said, my voice smooth as glass, "I don't want to talk right now. If there's anything related to procedures, my lawyer will respond. And if it truly is a misunderstanding, like you said, then let the court confirm that. But, Mom," I ended the call. My fingertip tapped the screen lightly, a simple touch that cut straight through an entire act. Less than a minute later, a message came in. No more Mom. No more "I'm worried about you." No more softness. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you know how this will affect Aaron? Are you trying to ruin everything?" I stared at the text, feeling my chest grow cold, not from the insult, but from the fact that, finally, the mask had fallen. A second text arrived so fast I knew she had rehearsed it in her head already. "If you drag this into court, a lot of things are going to come out, not just ours, yours too. Are you sure you want everything dug up?" I inhaled slowly and screenshot the messages. Every line was a knife, but also a piece of evidence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to argue with someone who had slept with my husband and helped siphon money from my son's company. That night, I sent all the screenshots to Daniel with one brief line. "They've started threatening." He called soon after. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine, just mourning what I once believed was real." "I understand," Daniel said. "Save all the messages, all the emails. Don't delete anything. This is intimidation, coercion. Legally, it doesn't help them. In fact, it hurts them." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. What do you think they'll do next?" Daniel paused for a moment. "When guilty people panic," he said, "they usually go one of two ways, begging or threatening. They've already done both today. Stay calm. Keep recording. You're not alone in this." The next morning, when I opened my email, I saw an anonymous message. No name attached, just a blank, unfamiliar address. Subject line: "If you know what's good for you, stop." The body was only a few lines. "If you don't want Aaron to find out everything, withdraw the divorce petition. Some things are better left buried. Don't make us do something no one wants." No signature, none needed. I knew exactly whose tone that resembled. I didn't feel fear. I felt something sadder. They were using my love for my son as leverage. They struck at the softest place, thinking that if they mentioned Aaron, I would retreat. They didn't understand that because of Aaron, I had no choice but to move forward. I printed the email, placed it into a folder, then forwarded it to Daniel. He called within minutes. "How long ago did you get this?" "I just opened it this morning." "Good. Leave it in your inbox. Don't reply. Don't delete anything. This is more evidence. The more we have, the clearer the picture becomes for the court." That evening, Leon didn't come home. No call saying he'd be late. No text. I sat in the living room listening to the wall clock tick. Not until almost 10 p.m. did my phone vibrate. A text from Leon. "I'm staying at a friend's for a few days. I think we need time to cool off." I looked at the message and almost laughed. Time to cool off wasn't for my sake. It was for him, to gather documents, erase traces, call his lawyer, strategize. I didn't reply. The next day, a neighbor mentioned seeing Leon driving out of town early that morning. Sophie didn't show up at the small shop where she worked part-time either. I didn't wonder where they went or who they were staying with. I only understood one thing. When cornered, they chose to run. In the days that followed, the house grew quiet in a different way. No more Leon rummaging in his office, no more midnight trips to the refrigerator. I slept a few hours straight, no longer jolting awake at 3 a.m. from the sound of someone turning over beside me. But I didn't fool myself into thinking it was over. In fact, the quieter things became, the more certain I felt. The real battle was just beginning. One evening, while I sat at the kitchen table sorting through all the evidence I'd gathered, emails, transfers, recordings, messages, threats, I realized my hands no longer shook. Each page was no longer an open wound, but a milestone. Each milestone moved me farther from the darkness Leon and Sophie had created. I organized everything into labeled folders, then placed them into a box and locked it. I used to think only men needed secret safes. Now I understood women need a place for truth, too. That night, before bed, I stood at the doorway of my bedroom, looking at the neatly made side of the bed that used to be his. I didn't feel lonely. I simply felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after a day spent doing something that matters. I turned off the light, lay down, and listened to the wind brushing through the trees outside. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, "They can run. They can threaten. They can lie. But this time, I have the law and the truth beside me. I'm no longer the woman standing outside a window, holding a fallen waffle with no idea what to do." With that thought, I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I slept through the night, because I knew that tomorrow and the days after, I wouldn't be on the defensive anymore. I had filed. I had struck back. And I would see this through to the end. 3 days after Leon left the house, the atmosphere around me shifted completely. Not peace, but the heavy stillness before a storm. I could feel they were planning something. their panic hiding behind the unusual silence. No messages from Sophie, no calls from Leon. That kind of silence never means peace. It means calculation. That day, I cleaned the house, keeping everything in its place. When a woman prepares for battle, she often straightens the small things first, reminding herself she still controls some part of her life. Around 10 p.m., I was sitting on the couch reading a few of Daniel's notes when someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, hard and forceful. Not the polite tap of a neighbor returning misplaced mail. This kind of knock carried an urgency, as if the person outside wanted to shatter the quiet I had worked so hard to rebuild. I set the papers down and walked to the door. Through the narrow gap, I saw 2 figures. The porch light illuminated their faces. Leon, Sophie. They stood closer together than usual, not out of affection, but out of fear. I knew instantly they weren't here to apologize. I opened the door just enough to see them clearly. "Margaret," Leon said, trying to keep his voice steady, "we need to talk." I looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were still the same eyes of the man I once loved, once held hands with during late afternoon walks in the park. But now those eyes held a mix of anger and worry. The confidence of a man who thought he controlled everything was gone. "I have nothing to say," I replied calmly. Sophie stepped forward. She wore a long beige coat, her hair pulled back hastily, mascara smudged as if she had been crying or wanted to look like she had been. Her eyes were red, but without the depth of real pain, only the trembling of someone afraid of exposure. "Mom, please, just listen. Don't tear the family apart. Don't make things worse." I narrowed my eyes. "Family?" I asked. "Which family are you talking about?" Sophie bit her lip but said nothing. She turned to Leon for help. Leon stepped closer. "Margaret," he said quietly, "you're overreacting. Divorce. It doesn't have to go this far. You're angry. I get it. But bringing a lawyer into this will only make things messier." I leaned lightly against the door, keeping distance. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just see the truth." Leon's face tightened. Sophie jumped in immediately, louder. "If you're listening to stupid rumors or letting people twist things, Margaret, you have to understand none of that is true. We didn't do anything wrong." I looked at her without blinking. "Then why are you afraid?" Sophie flinched. Her eyes flashed with panic before she tried to recover her sorrowful expression. Leon suddenly stepped closer, placing his hand on the doorframe, his voice shifting from calm to cold, sharp as a blade. "You think you can take me on? You'll have nothing if you continue. No money, no home, no reputation. You're destroying yourself." I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze. It was the first time I truly saw the truth in his expression, arrogance barely covering fear. People only threaten when they know they're losing. "We'll see," I said, each word slow and steady. Sophie immediately lost control. She grabbed Leon's sleeve, her voice cracking. "I told you. If she doesn't stop, Aaron will find out. I don't want him to hate me. Tell her to stop. Do something." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sophie had just blurted out the very thing she had tried so hard to hide behind countless, careful words. Leon spun toward her, his face draining of color. "Stop talking." He gritted his teeth, but it was too late. I stood still. My heart didn't race. The only feeling rising in me was clarity. At last, their masks were off. I let them argue for a few more seconds. Sophie stammering that I was ruining everything, Leon trying to regain control before realizing it was already gone. Then I spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Leave." Leon turned back to me. "We're not finished." "With me," I replied. "It ended long ago." I felt the warmth of the phone in my pocket, where the recording app was still running. Every harsh word from Leon, every inadvertent confession from Sophie, all of it was captured. Leon clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him with a kind of gaze I probably hadn't given him once in 30 years, the gaze of someone who was no longer afraid. Sophie gripped Leon's sleeve, her voice trembling like a wind chime in a storm. "Let's go. If she wants a fight, she'll lose." They turned away, arguing under their breath as they walked. But when they reached the steps, Sophie stopped. She turned her head, looking back at me through the strands of hair falling over her face. A look sharp as a needle, venomous enough that I could almost feel it cutting the air. No more pretending, no more tears, only the poison of a person losing control. I stood there with my hand resting on the door frame until their figures disappeared behind the trees. When I finally closed the door, the house echoed with a deep silence. I leaned my back against it and took a long breath. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear. I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder placed in the center, listening to every part of the conversation again. Their voices in the recording sounded like two sides of an animal cornered, trembling but vicious. I replayed it over and over, not missing a single breath, a single overlapping sentence, a single threat. I sent the file to Daniel with a message. "We have more evidence." Daniel replied almost immediately, "Good, you're doing everything right. From now on, you're the one in control." I set the phone down and looked out the window. The streetlight cast a soft glow on the leaves, trembling in the breeze. No footsteps, no knocking. But in that very quiet, I realized something. I had crossed the line from being a heartbroken wife into becoming a woman who no longer intended to let her life be steered by someone else. And more importantly, I no longer trembled at Leon's name, nor at Sophie's venomous stare. They thought they came to my doorstep to intimidate me, but they didn't know that the moment they stood on that step, I had already taken back the upper hand. I didn't sleep that night. But through those sleepless hours, I didn't feel fear. I thought of only one thing. Now it's my turn. After that poisonous confrontation at my doorstep, the house suddenly felt larger, quieter, yet strangely cold. That sleepless night seemed to age me a few years, but it also gave me something far more important: clarity. The next morning, I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the thin sunlight fall on the trees at the end of the street. My mind still echoed with Sophie's crying, Leon's threats, and my own voice, cold, clear, no longer trembling. In that silence, I knew I needed someone to talk to, not to cry to, but to steady myself. A name surfaced in my mind unexpectedly: Helena. We'd been close friends for almost 20 years, raising children side by side, volunteering at church together, sharing peppermint tea on porch steps in late afternoons. But then her husband was transferred for work. They moved to another state, and life slowly pulled us apart. But Helena, I had never forgotten her. And that morning, I called. The phone rang only 3 times. "Margaret?" Helena's voice held no distance at all. "Are you okay? You sound strange." I couldn't speak for a few seconds. Finally, I exhaled. "Can you come?" "My husband is grabbing the keys. Don't do anything alone," she said, without asking another question. Just an hour later, Helena was standing at my door. A touch of silver at her temples made her look wiser, but her eyes still held the same warm strength I remembered. She didn't say a word. She hugged me for a long time, a hug that cracked the wall I had been building inside myself for weeks. I didn't cry, but I felt something inside me soften like early snow melting in sunlight. "What happened to you?" she asked, gentle but determined. I poured coffee and told her everything, every detail, every moment spent standing outside Sophie's house, hearing Leon laugh inside. Every discovery I made in his office, every threat from the night before, every fear of watching my husband turn into a stranger. Helena listened without interrupting, without judging. Only when I reached the part where Leon said, "You'll have nothing if you go against me," did I see her eyes darken. When I finished, Helena sat quietly for a few seconds. Then she placed her hand on mine. "Margaret, you're not the only woman who's gone through this," she said, her voice low but firm. "I was betrayed too, just as filthy. Money was involved in mine as well." I stared at her. "You never told me." "Because I was ashamed," she said with a small smile. "But you know, the most painful part isn't the betrayal. It's realizing how long you lived believing the wrong truth." I understood instantly. She was so right it made me shiver. Helena looked straight at me and continued, "I'm telling you this from the bottom of my heart. Once you lose everything, you stop being afraid." The words sliced through the invisible restraints around my chest. I sat still, then suddenly felt lighter. It was true. I had lost Leon long ago. I was only now willing to face that truth. And when you no longer have anything holding you back, you become stronger. "Come with me," Helena said. "I want to take you somewhere." That afternoon, Helena drove me to a small wooden house outside town where a group of women gathered weekly. No sign out front, no advertisements, just a self-formed circle. But the way they looked at one another carried a quiet understanding. "This is a recovery group for women who've been betrayed," Helena said. "Everyone here has gone through what you're facing." I saw several women sitting in a circle. A curly-haired woman in her 50s, a younger woman so young it made my chest ache, barely 30 perhaps. Another wore a headscarf, her eyes long, sad, but steady. When I sat down, no one asked, "Why are you here?" or "Who hurt you?" or "What happened?" No, they didn't ask. An older woman simply looked at me kindly and said, "Welcome. No one comes here when life is peaceful, but everyone who comes here gets stronger." Her words tightened my throat. The session unfolded quietly, not a spill everything and cry meeting, but sharing small steps they had taken to stand back up. The young woman spoke about the day she removed her ex-husband from her bank account. Another shared the first time she went out alone after the divorce, without fearing she was being followed. Another described relearning how to sleep without the sound of a door opening, haunting her. I listened, each story like cool air passing over my own wounds. Not because I wanted them to have suffered, but because I realized my pain wasn't an ending. And I wasn't the only one walking through it. When it was my turn, I didn't share every detail, but I shared enough. I spoke of the double betrayal, the financial deceit, the hidden accounts, the moment I stood outside my daughter-in-law's home, hearing my husband laugh with a younger woman. The group fell silent. Then the oldest woman placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're still standing, which means you're stronger than you think. From now on, let that strength lead you to freedom." On the way home that evening, I looked out the car window. The streets I once viewed as heavy suddenly felt breathable. Helena smiled when she noticed my quietness. What are you thinking about? Freedom, I whispered. Helena nodded. That's the real goal, not revenge. I turned to her. I thought I wanted revenge, but I just want to be free of Leon, free of the darkness he built around me. Then remember, Helena said softly, the truth will free you, but it will also expose those who tried to use you. Back home, I walked into the kitchen, set down my bag, and poured myself a glass of water. The warm light reflected on the oven door, revealing something different in my face. Not younger, not prettier, but clearer, sharper. I walked to the office, opened the evidence box, and organized everything once more. My hands didn't shake. Everything felt defined in a way it hadn't before. Freedom comes only when the truth is revealed. I picked up my phone and opened Daniel's last message. The hearing will take place sooner than expected. Prepare yourself. I inhaled slowly and exhaled. I had cried enough, feared enough, lost enough. Now it was time to stand tall. In the coming days, I would face Leon, Sophie, their lawyer, and whatever excuses they had rehearsed. But I no longer felt overwhelmed. I had heard stories far more heartbreaking from other women. I had seen Helena rise from her own betrayal, and I understood. No one is going to save me but me. I closed the evidence box and locked it. The storm was coming, but I was no longer the woman trembling outside a window. I would walk into that hearing with open eyes and a steady heart. In the days leading up to the hearing, the suffocating silence Leon and Sophie created shifted into a series of strange actions. Like two hooked fish thrashing in a final frantic struggle before the noose tightened. On Monday morning, when I opened the door to get the paper, a massive bouquet of white lilies sat on the step. I recognized instantly that these were the flowers Sophie once said she couldn't stand the smell of. But the small card attached read, "To Mother Margaret, wishing you health and happiness. Sophie." The lavender ink curled delicately, soft enough to seem heartfelt. If I hadn't heard her the other night terrified of Aaron finding out the truth. I set the bouquet on the table without a flicker of emotion. The scent was strong, the falseness even stronger. The next afternoon, a gift box arrived, a cream shawl Sophie once complimented me on during Christmas. Inside was a handwritten letter filled with empty apologies about family bonds, unfortunate misunderstandings, and hoping for forgiveness. I read it all because I needed to see their intent clearly, but not one line stirred anything in me. Not anymore. The next day, Leon sent a very long letter saying he cherished our 30 years together, that he always loved me in his own way, but slipped in lines about how everyone makes mistakes, that we should handle this privately, and ended with a familiar phrase often used by manipulators. I don't want to hurt you, but if you don't stop, things will get out of hand. I folded the letter and placed it with the rest of the evidence. Those gestures weren't affection. They were the desperate reach of a drowning man trying to pull someone down with him. I wasn't that someone. That weekend, around noon, the doorbell rang. When I answered, a young police officer stood on the porch, polite and serious. "Mrs. Doyle, we've received a report that you've been harassing and threatening Ms. Sophie Doyle over the past several weeks. I'm here to verify the information." I straightened, hand resting lightly on the door. No panic, no shock. The only thing I felt was a cold certainty that they had begun attacking the place they thought I was weakest, my credibility and composure. "I understand," I said. "Would you like to come in?" I led him to the kitchen and offered him a glass of water. He took out a notebook and asked each question according to protocol. I answered calmly. so calmly even I marveled at it. I haven't contacted Sophie except to respond when she called me. And here, every threatening message, every letter, every anonymous email, I've kept all of them. I handed him the evidence folder I had prepared. He flipped through it, reading a few of Sophie's messages and the anonymous note. His eyebrows drew together slightly. "You've kept remarkably calm," he said quietly. "I'm tired of letting other people write my story," I answered. I signed my statement and called Daniel. The officer waited to confirm the details. Daniel picked up quickly, his tone steady but edged with steel. "Mrs. Doyle handled it correctly. Officer, I want to ensure every piece of evidence she provided is properly recorded. This is not a harassment case. This is a clear attempt to discredit my client right before the hearing." The officer nodded. "I realized that when I looked through the documents. We'll forward this file to the Internal Investigation Unit. Thank you for your cooperation." When he left, I closed the door and let out a long breath, not out of fear, but because it had never been clearer. They were playing their final chess moves, hoping to push me off the high ground. 3 days later, when I brought the trash out to the curb, I saw Leon crouch near the entrance to my yard. He didn't know I was standing behind him watching. Leon was digging through my trash, opening each bag, flipping through every cardboard piece, checking every small note. Looking for what? Signs of psychological instability? Something similar to the story he once used to justify his own behavior? Something to convince the court that I was not mentally sound when I filed the petition. I stood still, saying nothing. Watching that man, someone I had trusted for so long, on his knees in my garbage, my heart didn't ache anymore. It was simply empty. Eventually, Leon realized I was standing there. He shot upright, his face flushing, then paling. "Margaret, I was just looking for whatever dignity you still have left in there?" I asked softly. Leon opened his mouth, but no words came. Then he walked away quickly, like someone gasping for air. I looked at the torn open trash bags and saw myself, 30 years ago, collapsing if I had witnessed this. But the woman I was now simply put on gloves and cleaned each bag. When I brought the trash back, Daniel called. "Leon just hired a private investigator," he said bluntly. "They're trying to find anything to claim you're unstable. You need to keep everything calm and consistent. Understood?" "I know," I answered. "He's desperate." Daniel exhaled softly into the phone. "Exactly. When a liar hits the end of the road, their actions become ridiculous and meaningless, but you must stay mentally strong as steel." After that, I called Helena. When she heard about Leon digging through my trash, she burst into laughter until tears formed at the corners of her eyes. "See?" Helena said through her incredulous laughter. "Desperate people always reveal who they really are. You don't need to attack. They dig their own holes." "But I don't feel satisfaction," I said quietly. "I just feel sad for what once existed." Helena stopped laughing, "And that's exactly why you'll win. You're not fighting to destroy them. You're fighting to be free." I stood there for a moment. Then I said, "I will win, but I want to win the right way. By the law." The night before the hearing, I opened all the windows and let the autumn wind sweep in. The cool air was so crisp I could hear dry leaves skimming along the walkway. I laid all the documents on the kitchen table. each folder organized exactly as Daniel instructed. Bank transfers, emails, threatening messages, recording of the confrontation, photos of forged signatures, timeline notes, and Leon's unusual behaviors. I looked at everything and realized each small piece was a step I had taken to walk out of the darkness of that marriage. When I closed the box, I didn't hear my heartbeat pounding anymore, only a calmness, a new kind of calm that had never existed in those 30 years. As I placed the box into the trunk of my car, I whispered, "Enough, Margaret. Tomorrow you take your life back." On the morning of the hearing, I dressed simply and neatly, not to impress, not to look strong, but to show the woman I was becoming, steady, clear, and no longer controlled by fear. When I stepped outside, the early sunlight touched my face, warm and gentle, like a quiet blessing. I locked the door and turned away from the old road. My heart was strangely calm. No more trembling, no more hesitation, no more holding on to anything. The day of the hearing had arrived, and I walked into it knowing I had never been stronger than I was now. That morning, the air inside the courthouse was as heavy as winter mist, yet inside me there was a strange quiet. I walked down the hallway holding the evidence box, my steps even, as if measuring my own breath. Helena sat waiting in the back row and nodded gently when she saw me. Daniel stood by the courtroom door, adjusting his tie before giving me a reassuring smile. "You're more prepared than anyone I've ever met," he said. I answered with a nod. My heart was steady, my hands unshaken. I had been preparing for this moment since the day I saw Leon's car parked at Sophie's house. When the courtroom door opened, Leon and Sophie walked in first. I stood far enough to observe without emotion pulling at me. Leon wore a dark blue suit, a wine-colored tie, his face clean-shaven, hair neatly combed as if preparing to go on television. Sophie walked beside him in an ivory business dress, lightly made up, her eyes slightly red as if trying to appear sad but resilient. They looked more like actors playing a misunderstood couple than two people about to have their cruelty exposed. I took my seat. My calmness made both of them pause. Sophie shot me a tense glance, while Leon turned away as though ignoring his own unease. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I inhaled deeply, then sat, placing my hands on my lap. Daniel began. His voice was low, steady, unmistakably clear. "Your Honor, today we will present a series of evidence showing that my client, Mrs. Margaret Doyle, was financially exploited, severely deceived, and intentionally placed at a disadvantage during her 30-year marriage by her husband and daughter-in-law." The opposing attorney reacted immediately. "Your Honor, my clients deny all allegations. This is a family misunderstanding, and the couple can reconcile." Daniel raised a hand politely but firmly. "Permission to continue. We have evidence, not speculation." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Daniel opened the first folder. He presented each financial document Leon had signed under my name. He held up hotel receipts, bank transfers to Sophie Doyle, all dated during Leon's non-existent business trips. Then came the emails between Leon and a shady accountant discussing shifting funds before Aaron finds out. Sophie's face visibly drained of color. Leon sat upright, trying to maintain composure, but I saw the small twitch in his jaw. Daniel continued, "And here." He opened the audio file. "Is the conversation between Mr. Leon and Ms. Sophie, recorded by my client the night they came to her home to pressure her." I had listened to the recording dozens of times, but hearing it now, under bright courtroom lights, felt surreal, like listening to the autopsy of my old life. Sophie's shaky voice filled the courtroom. If Aaron finds out, I'm done. Do something. Leon's voice followed, low and furious. She'll have nothing if she goes against me. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Sophie immediately cried out. I didn't know she recorded it. I was just upset. Her attorney tugged her sleeve, trying to quiet her, but Sophie had lost control. She turned to Leon, her voice cracking. You said you'd handle everything. You promised. What am I supposed to do now? Leon gritted his teeth. Stop talking, Sophie. I watched them, not with joy, not with gloating, only a deep sadness. Sadness for the man I once loved and for the young woman who helped destroy my family and was now trapped in the web they both spun. The judge struck the gavel. Order! But Sophie was unraveling. She pointed at Leon. You made me do everything. You told me to use my account to hide it. You said Aaron would never find out. You promised. Silence fell over the courtroom. Leon spun toward her, face reddening. Are you insane? What makes you say that? You did, Sophie nearly screamed. Their attorney looked defeated. Daniel rose, calm as ever. Your Honor, my client has stated nothing beyond the truth, and now the truth has revealed itself. He moved to the final section. We request 1. The dissolution of marriage as Mrs. Margaret Doyle petitioned. 2. A fair division of assets, excluding documents forged by Mr. Leon. 3. A separate criminal investigation regarding financial misconduct involving their son's company. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Doyle, would you like to speak? I stood. My legs were steady, astonishing even to me. I didn't speak long. Your Honor, I said, my voice low but clear. I lost my husband long before I learned he was unfaithful. I lost my family long before I learned they were deceiving me. But the deepest pain wasn't the betrayal. It was that they believed I wasn't strong enough to stand up. Today, I only want to reclaim my life and protect my son from the damage they have caused. Then I sat. The room fell silent. The opposing counsel had nothing left. The evidence was overwhelming. Sophie's confession, the recording, the finances, the forged signatures, and my calm. After a brief recess, the judge delivered the ruling. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court hereby rules the petition for divorce is granted. Mrs. Margaret Doyle retains her rightful share of assets, excluding forged documents. All irregular financial activity will be forwarded to the appropriate investigators for review. Leon bowed his head. Sophie burst into sobs. Daniel placed a hand lightly on my shoulder and whispered, Congratulations, you've won. I nodded. Not joyful, not triumphant, only lighter, as if I had finally set down a burden after an endless journey. The hearing ended. I stepped out of the courtroom, the door closing behind me, and a breath of fresh air touched my face. I had walked through the truth, and I was still standing. After the hearing, life moved slower, clearer, as if a thick fog had finally lifted to reveal the true outline of the world around me. I no longer woke with tightness in my chest, no longer listened for Leon's footsteps in the hallway, no longer wondered what lie he'd choose that day. All of it receded, becoming a closed door I no longer owed myself to reopen. But for Leon, every other door was quietly closing. News of the hearing spread quickly. Within 2 days, the local paper published the first article outlining the financial fraud investigation at the company my son co-owned. They didn't mention my name, but Leon's was printed in full. Words like embezzlement, misuse of position, and unauthorized transfers were bolded. Reading the article on my screen, I didn't feel joy nor satisfaction. I only saw a man shoveling his own grave, bit by bit, until he finally fell into it. The company forced Leon to step aside. But step aside in these situations always means permanently gone. They couldn't keep someone tied to financial misconduct, especially someone who had touched his own son's assets. I learned this from a call with Aaron. My son's voice trembled so much that I had to sit down at the kitchen table when I picked up. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I don't understand how Dad could do that to you, to me." I closed my eyes, listening to my son's shaky breathing on the other end. For years, I had imagined this moment. I would tell him everything. He would hurt. Then we'd hold each other and cry. But reality was different. My voice sounded low, soft, and calm. So calm, I barely recognized myself. Live better than your parents ever did. That's all. I heard Aaron let out a small sob. I will. I promise. When I hung up, my heart didn't ache anymore. Maybe because that pain had already been worn down to its very end, leaving behind a new space, empty, but not desolate. The next day, I gathered the last of Leon's belongings, old dress shirts, a few thick books he once said I wasn't knowledgeable enough to read, a box of buttons, worn-down work shoes, and the watch he loved, the one Sophie had given him for his birthday. I put everything into 3 large bags and set them out on the curb beside the trash bins. The sun was gentle that day, the wind brushing through the row of maple trees, and I looked at those bags as if they were 30 years of burden sliding off my shoulders. Not a single tear fell, no tightness in my throat like in the early days. I turned back into the house, closed the door, and the room suddenly felt wider, brighter, like it finally had space to breathe. Leon's friends, the ones who had gathered at my house every weekend, called me Sweet Margie, praised Leon as a level-headed, solid man. All disappeared. No one called to check on me. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered help. They chose a safe distance from a man sinking fast, and I realized they were never truly friends. One afternoon, I went to the supermarket to buy a few things for dinner. While standing by the dairy section, I caught a familiar figure at the edge of my vision, Leon. He stood there holding an empty plastic basket, shoulders slumped, dress shirt wrinkled, hair noticeably grayer after only a few weeks. When he turned and saw me, his eyes widened before instantly looking down. Leon turned toward another aisle as if he wanted to disappear from the world that very moment. I stayed still. I didn't walk toward him. I didn't turn away. I simply watched. Leon fumbled, set the basket down, and headed quickly for the front exit. I noticed his hand gripping the strap of his coat, trembling slightly. The man who once threatened me with a voice full of authority now avoided me like a student caught cheating. As the automatic doors opened, he didn't look back. And in that instant, I understood. I no longer hated him. There was no sting of betrayal cutting deep. No lingering why chasing me through every night. No tug of war between love and anger, regret and fury. All that remained was release. A wide, clean, peaceful emptiness, like a room freshly cleared of dust. That evening, back home, I opened the window and let the night breeze drift into the living room. I sat on the sofa, holding the old pillow I had kept for 10 years, and exhaled slowly. After months buried under threats, betrayal, and deceit, this peace reached me like an unexpected gift. Not given, not granted. I claimed it myself. I opened the door to my own life and stepped out of the locked room I had stayed in for 30 years. No Leon behind me, no Sophie lurking at the doorway. Just me and a wide sky opening up. If someone had asked me then how I felt seeing Leon in the supermarket, I would have said, I wasn't happy. And I wasn't hurt, and I just felt light. Light like someone finally letting go of a stone carried for too long. Light like someone stepping out of a house that had shut out the sun. Light like the first step of a person who has found themselves again. I didn't hate anymore. I was simply free. I left the supermarket that afternoon feeling as though I had placed a perfect period at the end of a long, exhausting chapter. And what surprised me was I didn't need to write another word in that chapter. It had closed itself neatly and firmly with the moment I walked away from the aisle where Leon stood with his head lowered. A few weeks later, I began doing something I once thought I'd never have the courage to do: selling the old house. The house I had lived in for more than 30 years, where our wedding photo once hung, where Aaron came home from the hospital, where laughter, arguments, hurried morning footsteps all lived. I stood in the living room on the day I signed the sale papers, watching sunlight spill through the windows, each floating dust particle drifting like memories reluctant to leave their last refuge. But then I understood. The house had fulfilled its purpose, and I had changed. I needed a new place to begin. I moved into a small cottage by the sea at the end of a white stone road where each morning the sound of the waves replaced the dripping of the coffee machine, and the scent of salt water touched my shoulder like a gentle reminder of how far I had come. The new house was small, fit for one person, but full of light. Each window felt like a painting that changed through the day: misty mornings, shimmering noon, amber gold dusk, deep night like unspoken thoughts. I planted lavender by the porch and placed a wooden chair beneath the awning to listen to the ocean speak at sunset. I began writing, not heavy things, writing the way one breathes. I started a small blog, The Gentle Shore, where I shared my mother's waffle recipe, the dishes Aaron loved as a child, and short reflections on my healing process. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but within weeks, the first comments appeared. "Your story helped me get out of bed after 3 months of depression. I lived through a marriage exactly like that. Thank you. Because of you, I finally reached out to a lawyer." Each message felt like a small grain of sand warming my heart, building a new shore, steady and soft. I realized my life didn't end at betrayal. It began when I shared my truth with the world in a voice calm and generous. One afternoon, while I was making orange blossom tea, I heard news about Leon. An old acquaintance texted that he had lost his position. The investigation was ongoing, and his reputation was nearly beyond repair. He had moved into a rental apartment in the suburbs, living alone, no longer invited to gatherings. Sophie had left the city, drowning in debt, her professional prospects collapsing within months. No one from her husband's family wanted to contact her anymore. I read the message, set my phone down, and only shrugged. Not because I felt they deserved it. No, simply because I no longer cared. Their path had split from mine entirely, and the door I closed long ago had been smoothed over by sea wind as if it had never existed. One late autumn afternoon, I took the key to my old house down to the beach. I held it in my hand for a long time, the small key that once opened laughter, tears, reconciliation dinners, and long nights of silent endurance. Then I threw it into the sea. The sound of it hitting the water was faint, but inside me it echoed like thunder. I am free. Not free from Leon, not free from Sophie, but free from the old version of myself, the one who stayed silent for too long. There on the sand I sat as the wind lifted my hair and the silver waves rolled in and out like breathing. I realized I was happy in the most mature, quiet, and profound way I had ever known, happy to be myself. That night, in the cottage glowing warm with lamplight, I wrote my first story in years. But this time, I didn't write to remember the pain. I wrote to see how I had walked through it. I wrote to remind myself some things we think are endings are simply doorways to new chapters. And the moment I placed the final period, I understood. Anyone who reads to the end of this story must be searching for a strength of their own, a comfort, a small light, a doorway, a gentle shore where the heart can rest. And so, before closing this journey, I want to send one message from the heart. Thank you, you, somewhere out there in this wide world, for walking with me through every part of this story, every wound, every step of rising again. I don't know where you're from or how you found this video, but I hope my story brings you something soft and real. If you've lived through a pain like mine, feel free to leave a comment. If you're searching for strength, write a few words so I know you're not alone. And if you'd like to keep traveling with me through more stories, please like, subscribe, or share this video, not for me, but for anyone out there who needs a small light to keep going. Thank you for being here at the end of this story. I hope you find your own peace.